Buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Depende del lugar del mundo donde nos estén escuchando. Bienvenidos a un programa de COU. Hoy un programa impresionante, más mundial que nunca. No se le esperaban, un esfuerzo inédito de la producción, la dirección y nuestros sponsors que hicieron una contribución más que platinum para lograr el panel de hoy, que es algo impresionante, nunca visto, por lo menos en el planeta Tierra. ¿Qué tal, Tincho? ¿Cómo te preparaste para el programa de hoy, que es tremendo?
La verdad que increíble, todo un honor, todo un acontecimiento el programa de hoy. Yo te diría que más que sponsor, esta vez de Adamantium. Eh, Así que muy contento por
Buenísimo. Piojo, ¿cómo estás viviendo este programa que va a requerir hoy el 112.000% de voz?
¿Qué haces, Exe, Tincho? ¿Cómo andan? Bien, no, la verdad
todo
que
bien.
muy contento, muy entusiasmado. Me motiva mucho estar llegando con esto que no lo dijimos aún, es programa de cierre de temporada. ¿Y qué cierre de temporada? Programa número 30, que lo empezamos en pandemia y seguimos en pandemia. Otra cosa impresionante, ¿no? Pero bueno,
Sí.
la
Es
verdad
verdad.
que muy contento, va a estar buenísimo, estoy
Sí,
ansioso.
sí.
Me serví una buena y generosa copa de vino para disfrutar este programa mientras lo vamos haciendo.
Sí. Y
Sí,
creo que hoy estamos más en pandemia acá en Argentina que nunca, aparte.
sí, estamos entrando en la fase 2 para festejar 30 programas de Kowdemic.
Sí, sí.
Así que, bueno, acá estamos, creo que vamos a dejar la vara bien alta. Sorry, pero bueno, la turra vas a tener que sacar del medio porque la dejamos al ángulo con este invitado.
Con cariño para lo de la...
No, obviamente, es un chascarrillo
Sí, sí,
entre hermanos.
totalmente.
Eh, pero bueno, se nos ocurrió a nosotros. Así que acá estamos.
Sigue el dedo en la
Y,
llaga.
sí, sí, sí. Eh, y bueno, aprovechando el presupuesto que tenemos, Piojo, no sé si querés introducir vos a nuestro invitado junto con el doblete lingüístico directamente, si te parece bien, al aire
Sí,
ya.
sí, bueno, comúnmente como saben, los llevamos un poco más largo con nuestra introducción y hablamos pavaditas, pero la excitación y el entusiasmo de arrancar con esto, vamos a dejar ese peloteo para el final y vamos de lleno al fuerte. No sé, Exe, si querés hacer toda tu intro mágica de siempre y yo hago la
Sí,
modestia traducción que pueda,
eh,
o cómo querés hacer esa parte.
sí, voy directamente a la introducción fuerte, breve, lo más breve que pueda. Pero bueno, me tengo que explayar porque hoy tenemos a alguien que pre-pandemia y desde los inicios de COU muchos de nosotros eh, podíamos seguir a través de los canales de YouTube y las redes, porque él empezó con esto de transmitir y enseñar y dedicar parte de su tiempo a generar contenido de COU. Estamos hablando con uno de los creadores de Dash 28. eh, para los que lo conocen, es Mike, aparte eh, productor de las partidas online de los torneos de Universal Battle, eh, creador del reloj online, un gran generador de contenido y obviamente ad honorem torneos online también se organizó. Eh, Así que, bueno, hoy es como uno de los, yo diría a esta altura está uno de los dioses del caos de Corne, bueno, pero de Cow, yo creo que es Mike. Está Corne, Nargel, Slanesh, Mike. Es otro dios de Cow. Eh, Así que espero que disfruten de esta charla que vamos a tener con él porque tenemos buenas preguntas y creo que son preguntas que nos hicimos nosotros para hacerles a él, pero estoy bastante seguro que son preguntas de nuestra comunidad y le vamos a sacar provecho estos minutos que lo tenemos con nosotros. Traducite todo eso, capo. Chao.
Bueno, vamos a intentarlo. Okay, so first of all, thank you, Mike, very much for being here. Exe just did a brief introduction, talking about what you did to the community, what you've done with Dash 28, that we all been following it through Dash 28. So we appreciate that very, very much. And just to be brief, he put you in the same level of the gods of chaos, Corners, Knowledge, and all of those guys. You're among them, but in code. So,
well, thanks. I'm honored to be put in such great company there. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. This is great. This is the first time I've done a non-US podcast before. So yeah, I'm excited.
Bueno, ahí Mike nos agradece por estar acá. Es la primera vez que está en un programa no English, así que vamos a ver cómo sale un poco todo esto. Así que bueno, equipo, largamos.
Yeah, just clarification, para aclararle al público que lo que voy a hacer para que se entienda un poco el flow de la charla es Exe y yo vamos a hacer preguntas en español, Piojo traduzca, Mike va a responder en inglés obviamente y Piojo va a traducir como para que se entienda un poco cómo va a ser la estructura del programa. Eso, nada, para aclararlo.
Bien dicho, buena aclaración.
Muy bien. Bueno, arrancamos con las preguntas. ¿Querés darle buena primera, Tincho? Y de ahí metemos el uno y uno.
Dale. Entonces sería, ¿por qué Cow? Si fue un refugio de Warhammer y migrar para Cow, o directo con Cow y no venía nunca antes jugando juegos de Wargame o de algún otro juego que no sea Warhammer y se vino directamente para Cow.
Bien. Okay, Mike, so our first question is why Cow? Was this Warhammer refugee place? You started playing all the war games before? First war game ever? Tell us a little about it.
Sure. Yeah, I did play Warhammer Fantasy. I played that for a few years. I started playing it in college, but couldn't really afford it, so I stopped, and then picked it up a few years later after I'd been out of college and could actually afford, the models and the paints and all. And then when Warhammer Fantasy ended, the club that I was in at the time decided to try a lot of different games out to see. We were trying to pick a new game to play. And I was living in California at the time, and in California, the tournament scene from Warhammer just sort of fell apart. It just kind of disappeared. None of the tournament organizers really knew what game to run next, so like all the tournaments just sort of stopped.
And which edition?
And lots of clubs just kind of fell apart.
In which edition was that?
Well, that was after the end times, so okay. That would have been like the last edition of Warhammer, going into Kings of War, second
Octava, no?
edition.
Sí.
Okay.
Yeah. So we played we tried out Age of Sigmar, and we tried Kings of War, and we tried 2 or 3 other games. Like we tried Wrath of Kings, which is that game that everybody uses for their Trident Realm armies now, because Cool Mini or not stopped supporting the game, so the models are really cheap. But we kind of toyed around with that, and we tried Frostgraves. Like we tried a bunch of games and narrowed it down to like the 1 or 2 that we all liked the best. And we picked Kings of War as the game that we mostly wanted to play. And then we also played like Wrath of Kings and Frostgrave sometimes. And that's kind of how I got started in Kings of War. It was just from me and my club trying a few different games to figure out what our new main game was going to be, and that was the one that we landed on.
Okay, that's very good to know. I'll translate that part and then we will continue with a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Bueno, básicamente lo mismo que pasó en todo el mundo. A partir de octava dejaron de jugar Warhammer, no hubo mucho seguimiento con Age of Sigmar ni End of Times y empezaron a probar otros juegos, variedad de juegos, cantidad de juegos, entre todos ellos surgió Cow, apareció, ahí fueron acortando a los juegos que más gustaron como Frostgrave, Cow y algo de Wrath of Kings y bueno, siguieron jugando y Cow se fue consolidando y quedó un poco como el juego principal, primero en la comunidad y después un poquito en el país. Entre los de Fantasy, así que ahí más o menos la traducción estimada.
Perfecto. Yo ahí me echaría una pregunta que es, ¿existe una comunidad que sigue jugando Fantasy y es numerosa o ya directamente se descartó Fantasy y no juegan más? Por lo menos en Estados Unidos.
Perfecto, sí, me pareció una muy buena pregunta obligada, así que ahí vamos. So Mike, a natural question after what you told us is there still a community for Warhammer Fantasy, Age of Sigmar and the like, or did everyone transition to Kings of War or other games? How large is that community, if there is?
Yeah. I know that there are still some people that play old editions of Warhammer Fantasy, but I don't know any of them personally or where they are. It's one of those things that you hear about that somewhere in some store on some day, those guys get together and still play. But like even when Warhammer Fantasy was still a going game, like 7th or 8th edition, there were still people who would get together to play older editions of Warhammer because that was their favorite edition of it. So I'm pretty sure those people still do that occasionally. There are a fair number of people that play Ninth Age, and there's a fair number of people that play Age of Sigmar. If I had to guess, it varies a lot by where in the US you are. Because in some parts of the US, when Warhammer Fantasy ended, a lot of the tournament organizers got together and all decided that they were going to switch to one game. And so for the parts of the country that picked Kings of War, they just sort of kept going like nothing happened. And those are the parts of the U.S. that tend to have larger and more active Kings of War communities and more tournaments. So it kind of varies. I know like right where I live in Virginia, I know in one part of Virginia, a little further south from me, there are a lot of people that play Ninth Age. And I know there's still a bunch of people that play like 40K and Age of Sigmar like north of me. And the Kings of War players are just kind of scattered around. Like it's close enough that you can drive like an hour and a half and meet somebody at a store or at their house and play with them. And you can have a GT and get, 20 to 30 players who drove 3, 4, or 5 hours, and that's typically what they look like. I'm not sure whether more people play Ninth Age than Kings of War. I'm pretty sure there are more people overall playing Age of Sigmar just because GW pushes that. But I think the Kings of War community is a good size. It's a nice manageable size. You can have good full tournaments, but they're not super crowded. And it's growing. Like even in the last year, even during COVID, there have been a lot of people expressing interest in it and working on armies. So I feel like once the restrictions start lifting here, as more people get vaccinated, like I feel like the community is going to have a little kind of mini explosion. Like the first round of in-person events are going to see a lot of new faces and stuff like that. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. A very good answer. But just on the record, you're saying that Code community is far better than Warhammer community, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
No question. I would take,
no
I would
question.
take the Kings of War community and game over any other community or game. The only thing I miss is there's like a few people that I played Warhammer with that I wish had moved over with us. But like some of those folks are playing like Malifaux now for some reason.
Yeah.
Or just kind of dropped out of the hobby altogether because they weren't sure which way things were going to go or what they wanted to do. So I miss a few people, but I'm really happy with everybody that we've got. I think it's a great community.
Okay, that's very good to know.
Traducción, Piojo, pues.
Sí, bueno, entonces ahí Mike nos acaba de contar un poco que sí, que efectivamente queda una comunidad que juega Age of Sigmar, Ninth Age o como le digan, allá, que queda gente jugando, pero que bueno, básicamente cuando el juego empezó a dejar de traccionar, más allá de que lo empuja en Workshop, que siempre empuja un poco, cuando el juego dejó de traccionar, se juntaron varios organizadores, decidieron un poquito que iban a meterle fuerza a COW para organizar torneos y estar un poco todos en la misma página con eso. Después nos contó bastante de su comunidad local en Virginia, pero que más o menos te subís al auto, haces una hora y media y estás jugando COW con gente muy macanuda. Y bueno, le hicimos la pregunta obligada de si la comunidad de COW es mejor que la de Warhammer. Obvio que nos dijo que sí. Pero...
Me tiene más grande.
Y bueno, no, y básicamente que se extrañan algunos players puntuales, pero que la mayoría transicionó, así que bien por COW.
Qué bueno. Allá también le hacen bullying a Age of Sigmar.
Mike, so one last brief question about it. Does Age of Sigmar gets bullied in there too? Because, here we like bully a little bit the players of Age of Sigmar.
I don't know, because I haven't been to the store in a year. And
right. Makes
I think we tend to go on different nights. So but like even before that, like, I don't think we ever bullied each other. So, that would be like me and the two other people in my town going and bullying like the 8 kids that play Age of Sigmar. Like that's fun, right? Like,
quería que lo diga él. Perfecto.
So I think it's just more of, what are you playing? Oh, that other game? Okay, fine.
Ese va a ser el título de la entrevista.
Okay. Bueno, básicamente ahí Mike nos contesta que no, que allá no hay mucho bullying, pero que tiene que ver con que los otros que juegan el juego son unos chiquilines, y que no se cruzan mucho en el club, y con toda la de la pandemia se han visto poco, así que se ve que es un poco más pacífico allá en Estados Unidos, más civilizado.
Sí. Bueno, continuemos. La segunda pregunta para Mike es ¿a qué club pertenece él o área en la que está jugando y cómo es su comunidad local, ¿no? A sabiendas de que Estados Unidos es un país enorme y que se juega a lo largo de todo el país, que nos cuente un poco más de su club y como en una escala más chica, ¿no? Como acá hicimos cuando hablamos del LUF o cuando hablamos del folde, es la pregunta más para ese lado.
Ok.
Digo, si querés traducirle directamente la pregunta, y lo que hacíamos era una explicación de por qué la pregunta.
Perfecto, dale. Okay, so Mike, I think that we usually do on the show when we invite people from other clubs is ask about their community, their clubs, like locally, not only in the US, but where you play, where you are based. How is it in there? How many people? So talk us about that. Guide us through.
Yeah, sure. So I'm in a club called the Aristocrats, and there's 4 of us that regularly show up, and a couple of others that show up when they can, but have a lot of kids, so that makes it hard for them to actually show up regularly to go to tournaments and stuff like that. But there's 4 of us that go to pretty much any tournament in the region, and we tend to do pretty well. Obviously, when one of the people in your club is Alex Chavez, which is a former U.S. master, like that sets the competitive bar very high for your club game nights, right? You show up and you're like, okay, I brought a new list. Let's see how Alex tears this one apart. And, so I got to, I was never a great Warhammer fantasy player because I tended to be in clubs that were more casual. And then when I moved to the East Coast, Kings of War was very competitively focused, very tournament focused, because the community was smaller and the people who played it were mostly people who were interested in going to tournaments and trying to qualify for masters. And so, people who might have considered themselves just casual Kings of War players were still way better tacticians than people that played Warhammer. Okay. And yeah, so we kind of started this club together. And I didn't know who these guys were. They were just a couple of, local guys who lived within an hour of me that I could go, that I met at like a one-day event when I first moved back to Virginia. And so I went and I played against them, and they just completely stomped me every game for weeks and weeks and weeks until I got good enough to, actually occasionally win games or whatever. And then we went to our first GT as a club, and the other guys in my club just smashed everyone, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. It's not that I'm really bad at this game. It's that I've been playing against the best people in the region.
They were really good.
Right, they're just really good. And so I did great. I went like 2 and 3 at a 5-game tournament for like the first one I went to. I'm like, wow, that's way better. If I won 2 games of Warhammer against the people on the West Coast, I thought I was doing well. But yeah, so I would say, there's a split between. Right now between folks who have been playing Kings of War kind of since the beginning, kind of since Warhammer ended, and then there are newer folks that have just recently started picking up the game in the last year or two. And the folks who have been playing for a long time are very competitive focused. They're very tournament focused. Like it's people who go to events because they want to qualify for the Masters. And then there are folks that are just trying to get into it because they've kind of they just missed fantasy gaming. And they wanted to find a new game, or maybe they tried Age of Sigmar for a couple of years and found that they didn't really like it. So it turns out that like in the town that I live in now, there's this whole club of guys that I didn't know about that I just met before the pandemic, and there's like a dozen of them, and they play historical games and they play fantasy games, and like I had no idea they existed, and then I finally met them, and they were like, yeah, we're thinking about getting into Kings of War, and I was like, well, sweet. I would love to show you guys this game and talk to you about it, invite you to events. And like I just kind of started talking to those guys, and then the pandemic hit. But I've been keeping up with them over Facebook, and they've kept working on like their armies. And as they've gotten vaccinated, like they've started playing again. So like locally for me, I've kind of got 2 different things. I've got like some local people that live, 5 minutes from me who are really new at the game, who I feel like I should be a good teacher and like a good ambassador for Kings of War and for the Kings of War community too. And then I've got like my actual tournament club that I need to drive about an hour to go see one of those guys. And like that's where you have to bring your A game, because like that's like Masters practice every week.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of what playing Kings of War is like for me.
Okay. Let me get that. Bueno. Ahí nos contó un poco Mike de cómo es su comunidad, muy completo. Él juega en un club que se llama Los Aristocrats. Después, ahora hagan todas las repreguntas que les parezcan pertinentes. Básicamente, ahí se empezó a juntar con gente cuando hicieron la transición a Go. Entre ellos, Alex Chávez, un former US Master Champion, o sea, uno que juega muy muy bien, y los otros que juegan con ellos regularmente también todos muy muy buenos. Contaba Mike que le ganaban seguido, le daban paliza seguido, y después fueron todos juntos a un torneo, empezaron a jugar torneos y fueron a un torneo y dice que la rompieron toda, y bueno, ahí Mike se dio cuenta que no es que él era malo, sino que los otros eran muy muy buenos. Y bueno, por otro lado nos está contando un poco hacia el final que además de estos amigos con los que juegan en forma regular y algunos otros que un poco menos porque bueno, tienen familia y esa historia, pero que además hay gente como un poco como nos pasa acá a nivel local, hay gente que juega otros juegos históricos o otro tipo de juegos y que empezaron a tener curiosidad por COW y está viendo de ficharlos a su club como bien hace Exe, ¿no? Para la Alianza del Norte, ver de ficharlos a su club y explicarles un poco de qué va el juego y toda esa historia.
La evangelización de Marce también podría entrar.
Exacto,
claro.
Exacto.
Y una pregunta acorde a esto es si juegan en el club o si tienen un otro tipo de juego, se dedican 100% a Cow.
Okay. So, Mike, one question that we had is about the games that you play in your club. It's like 100% co. Do you switch sometimes with others? Is there like actually a club? Do you play in houses? How does it go?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So when I play with my club mates in the Aristocrats, we usually play either at somebody's house or at a store, just depending on what's convenient. We had a regular game night at a store that was like an hour drive from me before the pandemic, and I don't know. I'm hoping we'll pick that back up. But we have like a gaming day at somebody's house planned for a couple of weeks from now. And it'll be the first time I've gotten together with anybody since before the pandemic. So I'm looking forward to that. And then the local guys, we usually meet at a store, at the store here in town. There's a hobby store in town that has a lot of play space. So we usually meet to play there. Or sometimes I'll have people over to my place if they're driving in from out of town to play. So yeah, it's just whatever we feel like doing. It's either at somebody's house or at a store. Just kind of depending. You know, if it's somebody you're really comfortable with, then you invite them over to your house. And if it's somebody that you don't know all that well, then you arrange to meet them at a store instead.
Okay, yeah, sounds safe. And Mike, about the games, do you play like just Go or do you play other things?
Oh, sure. I mean, right now I'm just playing Kings of War. I know some of my friends were trying out the Song of Ice and Fire game.
Oh yeah,
Great game.
Many or not.
Great game.
Some people like that. Yeah. Like some people say great things about it.
Yeah.
I was only so interested in it because I bought a lot of Wrath of Kings models when it first came out, and then Cool Mini or Not stopped supporting it to support Song of Ice and Fire instead. So I'm a little annoyed at them over that because I actually really like Wrath of Kings.
Point.
Sounds reasonable. Yes,
yeah,
sounds reasonable.
And I'm not sure whether Song of Ice and Fire has a lot of staying power as a game. Like the models look nice, and I see as many people buying those models to use for other games to use for Kings of War as I do people actually playing it. So I mean, we'll see whether they keep supporting it or not. If people like it, like I hope they enjoy playing it. But right now, I mostly just play Kings of War. Like every other game that I played, I kind of stopped playing in favor of playing Kings of War. So that's kind of the whole show for me right now.
Okay, so a purist we would say.
Okay. Exactly.
Ok. Bueno, básicamente le preguntamos al respecto de los juegos que juegan y nos contó que en su comunidad principalmente están jugando Cow y que él juega puramente Cow, pero que, bueno, está ganando un poquito de terreno el juego de GOT, que es A Song of Ice and Fire, que, bueno, sí, acá lo baneamos.
Ya vas a jugar, Excel, ya vas a jugar.
Y después nos decía un poco que le tenía algo de bronca al juego porque la compañía que lo apoya con las miniaturas, con la creación de las minis, dejó de apoyar otro juego que él estaba comprando minis para apoyar a GOT, así que bueno, hay un poco del palo, merecido. Y después con respecto a cómo juegan, bastante parecido a nosotros nuevamente, con los amigos y más conocidos y que viven por ahí más lejos, se juntan en casas, y con los un poco más desconocidos o nuevos tienen un club local que les queda cerca, así que nada. Ya pediremos fotos en algún momento para saber más cómo es, pero muy similar.
Me imagino deben ser igual que acá.
Sí, por ahí un poquito más, por lo menos con más merchandising, pero bueno.
Sí.
Claro.
Bueno, así que, bueno, equipo, eso.
Avanzamos. Tincho, ¿querés preguntarme por...?
La pregunta, digamos, que tenemos también es si nos conocía a nosotros como comunidad de Cow en Argentina antes de web. Obviamente que no hicimos contacto y hoy la charla es debido a eso. Nada, en Europa sí nos conocen por otro torneo en Saladillo, pero Estados Unidos, si es el caso o no.
Okay. Okay, Mike, so next question is about whether you knew the Argentinian community before UB, because like now it's easier to get to know each other since UB and the online tournaments, but before that, you had any idea that we like existed? We know that in Europe, people knew of our existence because of a big tournament that we organized in a city here called Saladillo. But, well, just wondering if you knew anything about us before that.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing the pictures from the tournament in the swimming pools, right?
Yeah, that one.
Right.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I remember seeing those and thinking like, well, that looks awesome. Playing outside, they're in pools. That looks like fun. Yeah, so I definitely remember seeing that. And I've got I've got all the reader stats for -28, so I can tell where, like, how many people in which countries come and read -28. And Argentina's on there, so I know there are people in the country there, and that was about all I knew was that you guys had a fun outdoor tournament with swimming pools, and that there were people there that read -28. But no, you guys are great. It's been so great getting to know people from outside the U.S. over doing the live streams and doing online events from last year. No, it's really cool getting to meet people from Argentina and people from Spain and people from the UK. It's awesome.
Okay, it's good to know. Bueno, sí, básicamente Tincho nos dice que sí, que ya nos había visto por un lado en las fotos del torneo del Goblin al agua. Le pese lo que le pese al ME, parece que somos más populares por el Goblin al agua.
Emi se le está poniendo la...
Claro, que está retorciendo en el piso.
Sí.
Y por otro lado, nos contaba que, bueno, por las stats de Dash 28, él podía ver de dónde lo lee la gente y ya sabía que acá había ávidos lectores, entre ellos nosotros. Así que desde ese lado también nos tenía un poco en el radar.
Ok.
Bueno, perfecto, contestaba. Y ahora la repregunta de sus torneos vendría entonces, si nos quiere contar un poquito del Masters de Estados Unidos, cuándo arrancó, si él jugó alguno y bueno, del siguiente. Y la repregunta es si nos puede spoilear algo del torneo que ellos organizan o que él organiza, que es el Vanguard GT.
Ok. Esa se la dosifico. Voy a preguntar primero por el Masters y después por el spoiler. Okay, Mike. So thank you for that. And the other thing that now the ball goes back to you is about your local tournaments. We heard a lot of the US Masters, so we wanted to know if you played any. How is that tournament
¿Cuántos participantes?
organized? How many participants usually go? So go free and tell us about the Masters.
Okay, I can do that. No problem. You're doing a great job with the translations, by the way. If any of my answers get too long and you want to take a break and translate and then pick it up, just let me know.
Okay.
Because I will get going and just kind of keep going.
No problem.
So what I know about how the U.S. Masters began is that it actually did begin as a Warhammer Fantasy invitational event, and it's run by basically a board, by a group of people who are regional representatives, and the U.S. is split up into 8 regions, and so each region gets one vote. They have their one representative, and they get one vote. And when Warhammer ended, the people that were the regional representatives at the time got together and decided what they were going to do, and they decided that they were going to switch to Kings of War. At least that's how the majority voted out of the 8 voters. I don't actually know who voted which way because I wasn't really involved. But the majority voted for Kings of War, so it just sort of switched over to Kings of War and kept going. And certainly, like some regions were more enthusiastic about Kings of War, and so like for example, Texas, or the South region, as they're often known, or I guess officially known. Most of their large tournaments just converted straight to Kings of War and just sort of kept going. Whereas other regions like weren't necessarily so hot on Kings of War, didn't necessarily vote in favor of changing the Masters over to Kings of War. So like their tournaments all kind of stopped, and they have to kind of rebuild from scratch now.
Okay.
So if you listen to if you ever listen to Countercharge and you listen to Jeremy talking about how things are in California, California's in a region, the West region, where everybody wasn't really on board with Kings of War. Everybody wasn't really enthusiastic. So like all of the big Warhammer tournaments just sort of stopped and weren't run anymore. And so when Jeremy talks about having to rebuild the region, that's why. That's why he's talking about that.
Okay.
So you got your 8 regions.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I need to go up to that point and then we continue.
Okay. Cool.
Ok. Bueno, ahí básicamente nos cuenta un poco el origen del Masters, que para sorpresa de más de uno, era un torneo de Warhammer original, donde se dividía en 8 regiones el país. Cada región tenía un voto y bueno, armaban el torneo. Cuando Warhammer se cae, viene el declive de Warhammer, hay regiones que transicionan súper fácil y súper rápido a COW, como por ejemplo la región del sur de Texas, y hay regiones que bueno, les cuesta bastante más. Nos contaba de la gente de Countercharge del oeste, que primero tuvieron como que rearmar toda su comunidad, pero básicamente y afortunadamente después de la votación ganó COW y COW se quedó con el lugar del Masters, que es el torneo que siguen teniendo hoy día. ¿Alguna pregunta, equipo, hasta acá o seguimos?
Sí. No, si es el torneo, no llegué a entender si era siempre en el mismo lugar o lo van rotando y si realmente participan. Es un máster, o sea, es el mejor de todos, o
Okay.
si es regional.
Ok, perfecto. Le pregunto esos dos. Okay, so Mike, we have 2 questions so far. First is if this tournament it's like the Masters because it actually is played by like the best of the best, or it's like a fictitious name. So that is the first.
Yeah, no, totally. And that I think that goes into what I was going to say next anyway. So
Okay,
so the way it works is, so you got 8 regions, and each region can send 8 players to the Masters. So it's like it's like an invitational tournament.
Okay.
Each region can only send 8 people, and each region decides who their top 8 players are, and they get to make the rules around that. But all the rules are pretty similar, in that over the course of the year, you go to tournaments, you finish, wherever, you finish 3rd at one tournament, you finish 8th at another tournament, whatever. Each region kind of has its own formula for translating that into a ranking within the region for you. And then whoever the top 8 ranked players are in the region at the end of the year are the ones who get to go to Masters. And then if someone can't go for some region, they drop down to, the 9th person.
Okay.
So where I live in the mid-Atlantic, so I live in Virginia. That's on the east coast of the U.S. It's on the Atlantic coast, and it's kind of the states. I'm in the mid-Atlantic region, so I'm on the east coast of the U.S. and I'm kind of in the middle. So it's all the states kind of in the middle of the east coast there, and we take your top 3 GT finishes. 2 of them have to be in region tournaments, so you have to go to tournaments held in states in the Mid-Atlantic, but one of your tournaments can be from outside. If you travel, if you go to another region and play in another tournament there, You can also get Masters qualifying points for that. And so basically we add up, your finishes from your top 3 tournaments, and then the top 8 people get to go. And it's based on how many people were at the tournament. You have to have at least 20 people for it to count as a GT. And then if there's at least 20 people and you finish first, you get 100 points. And from there, you basically just like divide the number of people at the tournament by 100 to figure out, how much each place below first is worth. So, the further down you finish, the fewer points you get. But it's sort of normalized that way. Okay. And most regions do something like that. Some of them do different things, like they only count your top 2 finishes, or they don't count any out of region tournaments, or you can go to 2 out of region tournaments instead of 1 stuff. So it's, everybody makes up their own mind about the best way to do it for themselves. We're in the Mid-Atlantic, so we're kind of in between 2 other regions. It's pretty easy for us to get to other regions. So we count an out of region tournament, but like the mountain region covers like the whole middle of the country, and they have to drive really far to go to any events. So right. they probably have like different policies on how many you have to go to minimum to qualify, and whether they'll count out of region events and stuff like that. So so everybody sort of makes up their mind on how to best pick their 8 best players based on their finish for the year. And then those folks all go to the Masters. They get invited to the Masters. Okay. And I know and just one more thing is, I know in the Mid-Atlantic, we only use battle scores for Masters qualifying. So it's not your overall finish with your soft scores at any tournament. It's only your battle score. And I think some other regions do that differently, and they do take your overall score. So they do take like paint and sports into consideration.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other question, I'll translate both together, is it always like 8 by 8, I think? Yeah, so 64 players every time, 8 regions present every time, or is that like a little bit more flexible? How does that goes usually?
No, it's always 64 players, 6 rounds, 8 per region. They do have a rule for what they call mercenaries, which is people who went to enough events in their region, but didn't get enough points to qualify. If there's another region that for some reason doesn't have 8 people who can go to the Masters, then they can pick up a mercenary from another region to come and play on their team for them. Okay. So it's always 64 people, because like the Pacific Northwest, like all or the West, right? Like the West Coast, the 2 West Coast regions have had to do a lot of rebuilding. So for the first couple of Masters tournaments, their regional reps could only find maybe 5 or 6 people in their region who wanted to go to the Masters, or who had even gone to more than 1 tournament. And so they were like, okay, well, I can't really fill the full team, so I'll take like whoever finished 10th in Texas and whoever, finished 9th in Illinois or something like that. And those will be the other 2 people on my team, and technically count as being from my region, even though they live in a different region.
Okay.
Si alguno necesita mercenario argentino, voy por la comida y el agua.
That's cool. That's really cool. Exe is saying that if someone needs an Argentinian mercenary, he's up to it for the task.
100%. If we ever need one, I'll let you know.
Okay. So let me go ahead and try to get all these straight. Básicamente, Exe, respondiendo a tus 2 muy buenas preguntas, Mike nos acaba de responder muy completo, muy bueno. Atento, Marce, toma nota de todo esto. Marce, Emi, despiértense porque está buenísimo. Escuchen bien. El tema es así. Siempre se juega de a 8 regiones, ¿sí? 8 regiones, que como está dividido el país, y esas 8 regiones a su vez tienen que presentar a los mejores 8 players de cada región. Súper picante. Nos cuenta Mike que hay bastante flexibilidad. ¿Cómo dice, perdón?
Los más pijudos.
Sí, claro. Nos cuenta Mike que hay mucha flexibilidad en cómo arman el ranking cada región. O sea, hay regiones que solo tienen en cuenta los scores, hay regiones que tienen en cuenta pintura, fair play, etc. En eso hay bastante libertad, pero siempre estrictamente tiene que haber 8 jugadores por región. Ahora, también nos contaba que, con lo cual siempre son 64 jugadores y juegan 6 partidas. Así que bueno, nada, interesantísimo. Nos faltó preguntarle si el torneo dura 2 días, cosa que me imagino que sí, ahora se lo preguntaremos.
Sí, eso te iba a decir, que no lo aclaro.
Sí, y para terminar con esto, nos contó una parte muy, muy interesante y muy divertida, que es que además del ranking propio de las regiones, como a veces, bueno, se complica la parte de viajar o un player no puede jugar o lo que sea, si por ejemplo el octavo no puede, entra el noveno como octavo, ¿no? Pero además tenés la posibilidad de contratar mercenarios, que son players que quedaron afuera de su región e igual quieren participar, así que pueden ir como mercenario contratado de otra región, que me parece un toque muy, pero muy divertido.
Sí, muy bueno.
Le mandé
Mike,
yo mi mangazo, ¿no? Para los que no lo entendieron, que estaba haciendo era básicamente garronear.
So, Mike, one quick question and a quick acceleration. So, the tournament usually goes in 2 days because you said 6 rounds, and I think that's not humanly possible in 1 day, right?
That's right. Yeah, no, it's 2 days. You do 4 rounds on the first day and then 2 rounds on the second day.
Okay. And the other thing that Exe wanted to clarify is that if someone wants to hire him, they need to pay for the travel and the accommodation.
Sure.
He's expensive.
He's a complete mercenary.
That's cool. Yeah, actually,
Okay.
you joke about that, but before the pandemic, Nick Williams was planning on going to Lone Wolf because sometimes the UK guys will fly to Texas to play in some of the big Texas tournaments. And so Nick was planning on going to Lone Wolf. And my tournament, my in-person tournament is usually the week after Lone Wolf. So he had planned on flying to Texas and playing in that one and then just hanging out in the US for a week and then playing at my tournament. And he was seriously asking us, like, so if I do well enough at your tournament and well enough at Lone Wolf, and I managed to get back over here to play in any other tournament in the Mid-Atlantic, if my scores are good enough, could I qualify for one of the Mid-Atlantic spots for the Masters? And we were like, well, yeah, exactly. And we were like, some regions say you have to be a resident of one of those states in order to come, but we don't require that. So,
I buy a house.
Right, yeah. So you just come hang out for a couple of months and go to 2 or 3 tournaments and do really well, and then we'll have to fly you up for the Masters, right? You'll be our ringer.
Ok. Bueno, ahí nos cuenta una experiencia muy interesante hablando de Exe y sus intenciones de ser mercenario, donde hay un jugador, un tal Nick Williams, que es británico, pero que va a jugar seguido para allá, y bueno, se anotó en un torneo, el Lone Wolf, es un torneo conocido, y empezó a sumar puntos y nada, preguntó, che, si sumo los suficientes puntos, ¿puedo jugar acá? ¿Puedo ganarme un spot de los primeros 8? Y bueno, básicamente, si bien hay algunas regiones que exigen ser residente, ahí parece que no. Así que bueno, hay un par de personas que lo quieren ir a jugar desde otros lugares del mundo. Y no terminaron de responder si le van a pagar el pasaje a Exe o no, pero bueno, hay que ver, Exe. Tenés que seguir sumando puntos.
Eso no me pago la cuota y después no pago más nada. Es la argentinidad que le hago. Y ya está, soy residente, un toque.
Así que bueno, creo que ahí tenemos una buena cobertura. Le voy a preguntar quién fue el último campeón y en qué puesto terminó él, si jugó el último, ¿no? ¿Les parece?
Sí.
Okay, Mike. So last couple of questions about the master. I asked them both together. They are, if you remember, who was the last standing champion of the US Master, and which was your final position if you had the chance to participate in the last one, or if you ever participate in one.
No. So far there have been 4 Kings of War US Masters, and I've gone to 3. I didn't go to the first one because I was still living in California and hadn't really played Kings of War much yet. But I've gone the 3 years since. I usually finish just barely in the top half, so I'm usually around like 30th, somewhere around there overall or for battle. I usually do pretty well in paint. I'm usually like top 5 in paint.
Okay.
But like 30th in battle. And actually, this past year, the last time they had it, I finished 2nd in paint. So that's been one of my long-standing hobby goals for a long time. Is to thank you. Is to finish on the podium for painting at the U.S. Masters, and I finally did that. So I have no goals left in Kings of War. I'm done. I don't have to go to tournaments ever again. I've done the only thing I ever cared about. So yeah, let me see if I can remember them all. So the first U.S. Master was Patrick Zoro Allen, who's now on the rules committee.
Right.
The second one was Alex Chavez, who's in my club. The third one was a guy named Brad McKay, who's from a club called Dojo in Texas that you guys may have heard of. They're kind of one of the hardcore competitive clubs down there. That's like Dustin Howard and Tom Annis and those guys that you probably played against on UB tournaments. And the last U.S. Masters we had, the guy that won, his name is Eric Trowbridge, and he's from Ohio, so he plays the Midwest region. And he's just the nicest guy. He's like the nicest guy you could ever meet. He's so friendly.
What's the
and
name
he doesn't
again,
seem
sorry?
like he would.
On the last one?
Eric Trowbridge.
Okay.
Eric Trowbridge. Yeah, and he played an orc list that was just vicious. Like he just pounded people with it. I
remember that. I remember that list was. I really like it.
It's a great list. Yeah, and he's got. I'm not sure if his club has a name, but it's like him and Felix Castro and a few other folks out there that and they practiced a lot for the Masters, and he honed his list really well, and he did really well and won. So that's it. That's all the U.S. Masters so far. We're about to get another one here in a few months, so we'll see what happens at that one.
Okay. So I'll go with that part. I'm just going to say a little comment that I would have sworn that Tom Annis was from England. I don't know why, but I don't know. I had the idea. Ok. Bueno, básicamente ahí nos contestó Mike muy completo. Nos dijo que él generalmente termina a mitad de tabla, lo cual es un super accomplishment, ¿no? Terminar a mitad de tabla de los mejores 64 de todo el país no es poca cosa, pero que donde se destaca generalmente es en pintura, casi siempre primeros 5 puestos. Dicho sea de paso, la última vez terminó segundo, así que nada, una gran felicitación por eso.
Nos tiene que mandar fotos.
Sí, ahí le pedimos esto. Por otra parte, nos cuenta los 4 campeones, que acá estoy poniendo fuertemente a prueba la memoria, así que ayúdenme. Nos contó que el primero de todos fue Patrick Zoro Allen, actual Rule Committee. El segundo fue Alex Chávez, de su club. El tercero fue... ¿Ayuda?
No, Tomanis, no. I don't remember. No sé, no.
Mike, the third one?
Brad McKay.
Brad McKay. Okay. There you go. Thank you. Y el último es Trevor, que jugó con una lista de orcos que la tienen que buscar porque es buenísima, y dice que era el tipo más macanudo y más humilde de todos y los hacía pelota a sus oponentes, así que nota para los players orcos, busquen esa lista.
De hecho,
se puede ganar y ser buena persona a la vez.
Sí, de hecho creo que esa lista o ese estilo de lista fue lo que después dominó el meta en COW, diré.
¿Cómo era, Pincho? ¿Que era pared de carne?
Sí, era pared de carne y así estaba. Y es un poco a lo que se juega hoy, y él lo jugó principio de año 2020, creo que fue el Master, no recuerdo mal, creo que fue en febrero el Master del 2020. Sí, no estoy seguro.
Sí, fue porque saqué las fotos de ahí que están viendo en su pantalla en YouTube, y estaba ahí en la fecha.
Era una de carne y atrás te reventaba, y es un poco lo que hoy gana, hoy es competitivo, digo. Así que un poco es de él.
Okay, Mike. So, we are all like fanatics of Kings of War, so we can talk about this for hours and hours. But just as a final note, we wanted to ask you for a couple of pictures of your army, since you went on the second position in painting. Please send them over afterwards, and we will post them on our social feeds. And the other thing,
I can do you one better. Jake covered my army as an army of the month on Dash 28, so I will just send you the link to that article because that's got tons of pictures.
That's even better.
Let me send you that right now.
Okay.
And before we get off the Masters, there's one more thing I want to say about it.
Sure.
Which is that it's somehow the most fun room to play Kings of War in. You would expect that, like, since these are the 8 best players, and it's the most competitive environment, that would be kind of tense. But somehow it's somehow the most relaxed tournament to go to. People are just kind of chill. Like, everybody's there. Everyone knows each other. Like kind of the same people tend to go to Masters year over year. It's strange. It's like almost paradoxical that it's somehow like the most fun and relaxed yet really competitive room. It's obviously people that are doing really well, I'm sure it's tense for them, but the rest of us are like, we're just happy that we're here. Like, we made the Masters. That's great. We're having fun. We're playing games with other people who are really good at the game. So the games are fun, and competitive, but like somehow like you have more, I don't know. I always have more fun at the Masters than just about any other tournament, over the course of the year.
Okay. Well, that's
great.
a great note. And I think that's like one of the things that we love from Kings of War, like worldwide. It's that the game is so relaxed and people like tend to be so nice. And Exe even said, joking, that this last guy, Trevor, the one that it's like very nice and won the tournament, he said the joke that you can be a nice guy and win tournaments in Kings of War, like something that you couldn't do in Warhammer, because you have to argue so much and discuss so much.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so let me get that for the guys. Bueno, básicamente Mike cerró con una nota que creo que lo vamos a despedir al Masters con eso, pero que es muy importante para nosotros que estamos acostumbrados acá en Argentina a que haya muy buena comunidad y muy buen ambiente. Nos dice que el Masters, que es el torneo más importante que tienen con los 8 mejores de las 8 regiones, con todo el super nivel, es un torneo donde la pasan bárbaro, donde todos se divierten, se relajan, que por ahí sí los que están en los primeros puestos, peleando ahí por los primeros puestos, están un poco más tensos, pero que en líneas generales están todos muy, muy relajados y que se lo pasa muy bien, y creo que esa es una de las...
Que podría ser un ambiente recontra competitivo porque son los 8 más pijas de cada región y esperar, podría ser esperable eso, pero que nada que ver, que aprovechan para saludarse porque se conocen y se ven y que el ambiente es súper relajado, más relajado que otros torneos que no están jugando por algo tan importante.
Exacto. Así que bueno, si les parece, equipo, con eso cerramos el Masters y le preguntamos un poquito del torneo. La otra pregunta que me has hecho, Exe.
¿A cuándo el banco, papá?
Okay, Mike, so I think that's a very, very good brief but complete coverage of the US Masters. But we also wanted to ask you about the BGT, the tournament that we think that you organize. We don't know if there's a spoiler on that or not. Something that you can tell us about.
Well, I usually run the in-person version of that event in April, and I didn't have it last year, and I haven't had it this year. But I am really looking forward to running some in-person events. I've already got a 1-day event scheduled for June at my local store that I'm going to run. So I thought about whether I wanted to do another online tournament, and this year I felt like we were kind of right on the edge of enough people being vaccinated that we could start playing in person. So I just sort of didn't run the tournament online again this year. I just decided to wait and look forward to playing online. I don't know if I'm going to get back to running online tournaments. Steve picked up and started running It's Always Sunny in Panathor, which I think is fun. And I'm glad that I ran the tournament online last year because I think a lot of people really needed something around that time, and I got to meet a lot of cool people, and I had a lot of folks that I'd never met before who signed up to play it. You know, folks from England, folks from Spain, folks from Argentina, and that was all great. But cramming it all into a weekend, you know, the same style of doing an in-person GT, like I think maybe it's better to do the online events spread out. You know, maybe not quite the same kind of party atmosphere, but I'm hoping that as we get to go play in person, like we won't need the online events to have that kind of atmosphere. Like we can still play them. You know, we have a week or two to figure out your game, and we can live stream some of them, and I think that'll keep happening. But I don't know if I'm going to try to run another like online all-in-one weekend GT again.
Okay,
you know?
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Bueno, así que efectivamente hay spoilers. No son quizás los que algunos como Exe, que quería defender su título, quieren escuchar.
La vas a tener que ir a defender allá, Exe.
Sí, pero nada, básicamente nos cuenta que un poco la atmósfera del torneo está pensado para ser armado en persona, que él lo corre lo arma en su tienda local, y es un torneo así del fin de semana intenso, donde como que la idea es jugarlo en persona, y con tanto torneo que se está armando online, está pensando en no hacerlo este año y dejar ese espacio para otros organizadores como Steve, que bueno, que hacen torneos seguidos y que salen bien, así que parece que no vamos a tener BGT online este año.
No hay problema.
Así que equipo, si les parece, vamos para el plato fuerte, ¿no?
Sí. Dale, Exe, dale, perdón.
Bien, es por qué y cómo surge Dash 28, ¿no? ¿Por qué el nombre, para empezar? Y bueno, obviamente, ya que estamos hablando de Dash 28, le agradecemos porque somos consumidores de Dash 28, diría.
Okay. Okay, Mike. So now turning to the main course, it's about, of course, Dash 28. We were wondering, like, to break the ice, why the name? Why Dash 28?
Why Dash 28? Sure. So when we got together and decided that we were going to make this website for Kings of War, we of course had to pick a name for it, and so we just had people throw out suggestions, and then we were going to vote on them. And a lot of the suggestions were, in my opinion, way too long to be the name of a website, and we're also just kind of generic fantasy sounding things. People suggested things like, you know, the King's Hall, or you know, stuff like that, like stuff that sounded very kind of fantasy-esque. And I was like, yeah, those all sound generic. They don't really have anything to do with Kings of War, and they're really long for people to have to type or to say. And I was actually working on my first undead army at the time, and I was planning on putting a zombie legion in the army. So I'd been looking over the stats, and I saw that their nerve was Dash 28. And I was like, that's a really high nerve. And so I flipped through the rest of the book, and I'm like, well, that's the highest nerve in the game. And so I suggested, like, why don't we call the website Dash 28? And everybody was like, no, that's stupid. We don't want to call it that. I'm like, no, like, hear me out. Hear me out. It's actually a reference to something in the game. So people who play Kings of War will know what it means, but people who don't play Kings of War won't. So it's kind of like an in-joke, right? It's kind of like an inside thing that, like, you get if you played the game, but if you haven't, you're like, what's that? It's just nonsense, right? And it's the highest nerve value in the game. And so, like, it, you know, Dash 28 in the game refers to a fearless legion. And we were like, well, that's the Kings of War community, man. We're a fearless legion. That's cool. That's what we should say we are. So it's kind of sort of named after, you know, a zombie legion, but kind of named in honor of the Kings of War community. And it's also kind of an in-joke for the game, and it's a lot shorter to type than some of the other suggestions. So once I talked everyone into it, like, I think I won by 1 or 2 votes. It was pretty close. I can't remember what the the second place choice was. But I'm really glad that we picked that because I think it's worked out well.
Yeah, no one will ever remember the second choice. This
Right.
choice was great. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you this first because I'm going to translate it also. We very, very often do the joke about undead being OP. And as you said, the zombie legion is the highest nerf in the game. Any comments on that?
Are undead overpowered? I think undead are like, and I play undead, and I think undead are a little overpowered. Like, I kind of feel like maybe zombies shouldn't come in regiments, like maybe hordes and legions only.
Okay.
For that kind of unit, right? Like that kind of like scarecrow, Draugr, zombie style unit. Like, you never, like, one or two of them isn't supposed to be dangerous. That's why they don't have troops. But anytime, if you watch like The Walking Dead, when there's less than 20 zombies, nobody cares. Nobody's scared of that. It's when it's a whole big mass of them. So I kind of feel like one thing that I would do, even though I play with zombie regiments right now, if I was trying to balance out undead, I might start by dropping that really, really cheap unlock option and saying, if you want zombies, that they have to be hordes or legions, and see if that forces people to take some different things to unlock, or maybe not have such really cheap high nerve chaff units or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good proposal.
Yeah.
Es una buena propuesta.
Bueno, entonces el nombre de Dash 28 viene, súper interesante, esto yo no lo sabía, no se me había ocurrido, viene de que cuando estaban decidiendo un nombre, y ya surgían muchos nombres muy genéricos, como, no sé, Reyes del Salón o Reyes de no sé qué, a Mike le parecía que era muy largo, dijo, che, estaría mejor un nombre más cortito, que tenga algo de algo de que lo sepa la comunidad, pero que no lo sepan de afuera. Y se puso a mirar el libro y encontró que los zombies tenían de nervio en Legión Dash 28, ¿no? Que era como
Sí,
Dash 28.
Y de casualidad, digo, armando su ejército de undead.
Claro, sí, completamente...
Sí, fuera de buscar un nombre mirando el libro.
Tal cual, completamente random. Se encontró con eso, se puso a mirar el resto del libro, encontró que no había ninguna unidad con mayor nervio que ese. Por eso luego le hicimos la pregunta de si undead era OP o no. Y ahí le sigo contando esa parte. Y bueno, revisando lo propuso, lo votaron y ganó por no muchos votos, pero por suerte ganó. Y así tenemos a Dash 28 entre nosotros. ¿Me faltó algo de esa parte, equipo, o sigo con lo de los undead?
No, hasta ahí está bien.
Ok. Bueno, y la segunda parte que era, entonces le hicimos la pregunta en broma de que como eran la unidad con el nervio más alto del juego, si él lo asociaba con que undead era OP o no. Y bueno, nos hizo una buena sugerencia, nos dijo que él, siendo un jugador de undead, a veces lo siente un poquito OP, pero poquito. Y que una buena sugerencia, que nos gustó la propuesta, era eliminar a los regimientos de zombies, para que si uno quiere zombies tengan que unlockear con hordas o legiones, que es una buena e interesante propuesta.
Y trasfondo, sobre todo.
Sí, tal cual. Le agrega trasfondo como en Walking Dead, le agrega mucho. Así que muy buena idea. La haremos llegar al Rule Committee.
A Patrick Soro.
Exacto. So, Mike, okay, so continuing with the Dash 28, now that we know the name, and it's, again, a very good name, why did you start it? How the idea came, and how do you see it coming forward?
Yeah, sure. So it was originally Jake Cherapika's idea. I think he looked at the Warhammer community website that Games Workshop put together, and felt like Kings of War could use something like that, some kind of community focused site dedicated to Kings of War and Kings of War content. And so he put out a call on Facebook, a couple of years ago now at this point, asking if anyone was interested in participating in that. And I saw him at a tournament because he lives in the same region as me. He only lives like an hour and a half from me. And we were at a one-day event that I can't remember. I think it might have been in like Ray Shields' basement or something like that. And there were, 10 or 12 of us there. And I talked to him about it, and I was like, well, I don't think I want to write articles because I'm not a great writer. But I know how to run a website. So if you would like me to build and manage the website part of it, and you're willing to either write or pester people to write for us, I'm more than happy to set up like the site and do all the technical stuff and make sure that it's backed up and check the stats on it and keep track of how it's doing and all that sort of stuff. And he was like, okay, great, because I don't know anything about how to do any of that stuff. I figured we'd kind of stumble through it. And I was like, oh, okay, great, that's cool, no problem. I'm happy to do that. And so then we kind of got started. We got we got our initial set of contributors together. There was like 10 or 12 of us, and we picked a name. And we picked the name, and in like I forget how long it took me, like a day or two. I had the domain registered, and I had the placeholder website done, and I was like, okay, so my part's finished. Now you guys fill this thing up with articles because it's pretty empty looking right now. And so they did, and we launched on January 1st. I want to say it was 2018 or 2009. No, it must have been 2018. Let me look. I got the thing right in front of me. Okay. So January 1st, 2019 was when we first launched it. And so now we're in our third year, and it's doing really well. The group of contributors has changed over time. As folks say, like, I don't have time to write anymore. We'll drop them out of our contributor list, and Jake will solicit other folks. It's like, hey, we could use another hobby writer or another tactics writer or something like that, and try to get fresh people coming through, so that no one gets totally burned out, or eventually you say everything you want to say. There's nothing. It's like I've told everyone every hobby tip I have. I don't really have any more, so I kind of want to drop off. But no, the reception of it has been great. I really didn't know how big the global Kings of War community was. So I didn't really know like how much traffic to expect, or if we were going to get people coming back over and over again, or if any of it was going to work. Like, I just sort of looked at it all as an experiment, and figured we would see how it goes. And currently we're pulling like 4,000 unique visitors per month. Wow. Which I think is pretty good. Yes. And we get maybe I don't know. Let me flip the thing back and take a look. 18, 19,000 like raw views per month, and right around 4,000 unique visitors, according to Google, who I trust to do that math correctly.
Yeah.
I think so.
So that's been good. Like I feel like that's really in terms of getting the Kings of War community to read like one website. I think we've done a pretty good job, and we get a pretty good number of returning visitors as well. So we know that there are people who come back to it's not just folks Googling for one thing, finding us, reading that one article, and then disappearing, and we never see them again. There's a pretty steady stream of folks coming back, reading multiple articles. So that's great. The video part of it, I always kind of had in the back of my head, like maybe one day there'll be a video component to this, but I don't know what that would be or what it would look like until the pandemic came along, and then we're like, well, why don't we just live stream UB games? Maybe that'd be fun. Yeah. And that's where Dash 28 Live came from. Just boredom and being locked in the house and not being able to go to tournaments or play anymore.
Yeah. That's how this program was born, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. That's cool. So yeah, and from there it's just sort of developed. It's we have a Facebook Messenger thread with all the contributors in it, and I'll send them regular updates about how much traffic we're getting, like what articles people are reading, especially articles that have been out for a long time, or like what search terms people are typing in that are leading them to our site, so we can kind of tell like what content the community is looking for, like what might we be able to provide that people want, and people just sort of pitch ideas and write articles, and sometimes they're just a single article, and sometimes they turn into a whole series. I mostly let Jake handle, reading and editing everything and pestering people to write stuff, and I just keep the site running and make any structural changes to the site that we want. Like we added a beginner's guide because we noticed there seemed to be a lot of new people trying to get into the game and asking like, where do I begin? How do I get started? Can somebody give me an overview of the armies and stuff like that? So we're like, let's just make a set of articles that's literally just here's your beginner's guide to Kings of War, and let people walk through those and read them if they're not familiar with the game. And that's been pretty good. Our army unit tier ranking articles do really well. Like, even though they've been out for a year, they still get a lot of hits per month. A lot of people find those and read them every month. And I just opened a shop recently, actually. We've got some t-shirts and some hats. I don't know how well the international shipping works or how much it'll cost or anything like that, but I tried to keep the prices as low as I could for folks. And we've gotten some orders on that. We're not really trying to make money on this thing. We're just trying to make sure it pays for itself. And any money we do make, we're likely to turn around and use to provide prize support to tournaments that are interested in it. Because I've as a TO, I've often asked, like, countercharge, hey, do you guys have an actual prize that I can give away with your countercharger award? And Rob Fadouf will sometimes send you like a little blaster resin model of their mascot. And I managed to get Kyle to give me a couple of mastercrafted t-shirts a couple of years ago. And people really liked those. Like, people really, really like those as tournament prizes, because it's not something you can just go into a store and buy, right? Like, usually you go to a tournament, right, and the prize support is like a box of models for an army that you don't play.
Right.
So it's like, okay, that's great. Who can I trade this to? But people saw a Pizza Jesus t-shirt and a Mastercrafted t-shirt, and they were like, what do I have to do to win those? Because I have no idea. These are the first of these I've ever seen, and I don't know how to get them. So we were like, it might be cool if there were -28, mugs and shirts and hats that if somebody wanted them, they could order them. Or if a TO asked us, like, hey, can we get some prize support? We could just, send them a shirt to give away or something like that. It might be cool. So that's kind of everything that we've done with it so far. And of course the chess clock. Sure, fine. I added a chess clock because we really, really needed one.
Yes.
And in terms of what's next, like, I just launched the shop like a week and a half ago. So that was sort of the thing that I'm working on next. And I haven't really decided what the next upgrade or the next project for the site will be. Britton Williams really, really wants to figure out how to stream in-person tournaments. Like, he really wants to do -28 live with in-person tournaments somehow. But I don't really know how we would go about doing that. I think it would be really cool if we could figure out how to do it, but like, we'd have to get people and cameras to all kinds of places. I don't know.
Like ESPN.
ESPN.
Yeah, like ESPN, exactly. Like
Yes.
He's like, let's do ESPN for Kings of War. I'm like, that sounds awesome.
Six.
Yep, exactly. Now the commentators going nuts, throwing stuff in the air. Because they did that at the U.S. Masters a couple of years ago. Patrick Zora-Allen and a couple of guys, Michael Percy and Matt Carmack, covered the U.S. Masters when it was in San Antonio, Texas. And those are probably still on YouTube. And they basically did kind of the same way we do -28 live. They were just live in the room, and they had cameras set up over the top couple of tables, and they'd switch back and forth between the two tables. And I remember seeing that, and like, I was very impressed by how they had done that. And so I think when it became time to like, could we do this with UB games? I was like, well, yeah, I've already seen people do it with live in-person games in a really noisy room. Like, we got to be able to figure out how to do this when it's just us on the internet. But no, like, we've kind of kicked around, like, could we do that consistently at in-person events? And I don't really know how to do that without throwing a whole lot of money at it, because, you have to ship cameras to places, and get people to show up at tournaments just to commentate, and there'd be a lot of coordinating. Like, it sounds like a full-time job that would cost kind of a lot of money and probably not make any. So I don't know whether we'll do that. We might do that at like 1 or 2 tournaments that we're planning on going to, and it's easy to get to, but I don't think there's going to be any, us covering, one tournament a month in a different part of the US or anything like that for a long time.
Oh, you'll never know. But let me tell you, Mike, this is like exactly the kind of spoiler that we love to hear.
Sure.
Okay, so let me go ahead and give this info to our guys. Bueno, equipo, ayuda con esto porque es bastante y no me quiero perder nada de todo lo que nos estuvo contando Mike. Está muy, pero muy bueno. Vamos a empezar por el principio con cómo surge el sitio. Déjenme refrescar un apellido nada más. Mike, so the last name of Jake is pronounced Siaprika?
Cherapika,
okay.
Cherapika, there you go.
Bueno, básicamente se juntaron, decidieron hacer el sitio porque venían viendo el que ofrecía Games Workshop para su comunidad y no les convencía mucho cómo estaba hecho. Entonces Jake dijo, che, estaría bueno hacer esto, y Mike dijo, mirá, yo no escribo mucho, pero me la rebanco haciendo todo el soporte técnico, así que nada, si vos te pones a escribir y conseguís gente que escriba, le damos para adelante.
Mike armaba el sitio y el otro tenía que generar contenido.
Exacto. Así que bueno, así empezó, un poco tibio y un poco viendo distintas opciones. Después lo fueron profesionalizando, le empezaron a agregar secciones, revisiones de ejército, listas de beginners y un montón más de cosas que ahí les voy nombrando y que les recontra sugiero que vayan y miren. Si se defienden un poquito con el inglés, está buenísimo.
Y la página está bastante bien y tiene una cantidad de contenido impresionante. La verdad que es bastante completa y Keynote Word, pero bien armada y con muchas secciones y claras las secciones. La página es bastante amigable, así que muy recomendable.
Sí, totalmente. Así que bueno, así fueron armándolo. Después fueron renovando un poco la plaza de contribuidores. Y perdonen los Spanglish, pero ya que hasta ahora ya quedó cruzado. Fueron renovando la plaza de colaboradores para que vaya variando la gente, venga contenido fresco y otros ojos y otras miradas. Y bueno, de a poquito le fueron agregando cada vez más cosas hasta que en un momento surge la sección, un poco de la mano de toda la pandemia, del Dash 28 Live, que son estas televisaciones que empezaron a hacer de partidas. Creo que en V se hacía bastante sencillo, era capturar una pantalla y ya estabas comentando, sin quitarle mérito a toda la cuestión técnica, que no es menor. Pero bueno, era un gran lugar para empezar con la televisación de partidas online. Así que empezaron con eso. Y bueno, manteniendo a los contribuidores que bancaban el sitio, empezaron a ver la posibilidad de independizarlo un poquito, de que se pueda autosostener. Así que lo último que surgió fue el shop, donde se pueden conseguir distintos premios y soporte para torneos, donde ya tienen envíos, tienen remeras, merchandising, gorros. Yo, ni bien lo dijo Mike, dije, necesito la remera de Pizza Jesus. Voy a averiguar cuánto sale el envío porque necesito esa remera.
No la todavía el shop.
¿No largaron el shop?
Acabo de traer el shop. No vi la remera de Pizza.
Ok. Ahí le decimos a Mike que nos falta esa. Pero bueno, así que nada. Después pasando un poquito a estadísticas, que está interesante para los que sean más nerds como yo. Nos contaba que tienen 4.000 visitantes nuevos en forma mensual, que es un numerazo. Cuando lo lanzaron no sabían mucho qué soporte iban a necesitar para el sitio, y tienen más o menos 4.000 lectores distintos, lo cual es un montón para un juego de estas características, y bastante nuevo el juego y bastante nuevo el sitio. Nos contaba que el primer artículo lo habían largado en enero de 2019, así que están en su tercer año corriendo. Y, ¿qué más me faltaba de esto, equipo? Bueno, que había 4.000 lectores, pero que había muchos que leían muchos artículos, que consumían mucho material, con lo cual el sitio estaba gustando. Descubrieron que había una sección de beginners para explotar, así que armaron esa sección de cosas para que lean los nuevos, con qué objeto arrancar, de qué va cada facción, etcétera, etcétera. Un poquito de tácticas, un poquito de cómo neutralizar las típicas cosas que te ganan en COBO al principio cuando sos beginner. Recomiendo la nota de cómo luchar contra voladores, sobre todo si tenés algún amigo que te pone muchos voladores. Y bueno, creo que hasta ahí un poquito, y con el cómo sigue, que esta parte está muy interesante, nos contaban que estaban planeando y viendo... mentira, nos contó de, bueno, el desarrollo del reloj, que ahora le vamos a hablar a ese tema, que está buenísimo y que se volvió la norma de los torneos de V, así que buenísimo lo del reloj. Y hablando a futuro, un poco pensando en estos planes a futuro, nos contaba que están con la idea de televisar partidos, como decía Exe, a lo ESPN, televisar partidos en vivo, que lo han hecho para algún Masters, pero que bueno, hoy hay mucho más soporte para hacerlo bien, que sería muy caro y que generaría cero plata, pero que la idea está, así que nada, ojalá que lo hagan, porque la verdad que estaría buenísimo.
Sunday Sutter por ahí es un buen ejemplo a seguir.
Sí. ¿Cómo se llama, Tincho, el sitio? Que ahí se lo sugiero.
Sunday Slaughter.
Ok, ahí le digo.
Hacen buenos reviews de Battle Reports y filman a 2 cámaras con una móvil y fija de un lado y del otro y una cámara para dados. La verdad que está bastante bien pensado, es de lo mejorcito que de Battle Reports en YouTube.
Perfecto. Exe, ¿vos alguna o le disparo con esto?
No, tirale y después ya, si querés, vamos con los talleres de esto.
Dale. Okay, Mike, so thank you very much for walking us through the history of Dash 28 and the upcoming things. We are really looking forward to see the online games from real tables. We were wondering, when are you going to put the Pizza Jesus t-shirts in the job? And Tincho also has a recommendation from the guys of Sunday Slaughter. They do live battle reports, and Tincho said that they are really good. They are from Game of Thrones, but you could take some ideas from there.
Okay, cool. I'll check that out. Yeah, no, I'm open to adding new stuff to the shop. I got a couple of things in the works there that I can't talk about yet because I'm waiting for somebody to get back to me. But yeah, no, you might see some new stuff in the shop sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. And by the way, you mentioned.
And actually, while we're talking about it, I will bring this up because I've got you guys here. There have been a few Dash 28 live matches where, you know, I've been sitting there and I'm like, okay, so we're watching a guy from Spain playing a guy from Argentina. Why are we doing the broadcast in English? Like, that just seems really dumb. And I've poked at a couple of people before to be like, hey, you know, if we had a Spanish-speaking host and we could get Spanish-speaking panelists, we could try to do some Dash 28 Live Spanish broadcasts sometime. Because it just always feels so clunky to have, you know, the panelists and me up there, you know, speaking English, and then we get the players in, and they have to try to translate to English what happened in their game. And I'm like, you know, more people would probably watch this if we did, you know, the matches like this where both the players primarily speak Spanish in Spanish. So that's also something I've been thinking about trying to hook up. And I just need, you know, people that are willing to do it basically at this point.
I think you have to learn Spanish, Mike.
learn just enough to like start the broadcast, and then just don't say anything else until the end, and then just say goodbye. And just assume that everything in the middle went fine.
That's a really good plan. Okay. Well, that's great news, and I think that there's like a lot of people in the Spanish community that will be very pleased to have that space. So yeah, sounds terrific, and you're welcome, Latura. So bueno, ahí Mike, muy cortito, cerrando un poco con lo de Dash 28, nos contó un plan que tienen ahora en vivo, que es empezar. Tienen algunas novedades del shop que todavía no se pueden decir, pero hay que estar atentos a eso. Y que tienen la idea de, cuando televisaban un par de partidas de toda gente de habla hispana, se dieron cuenta que estaría bueno empezar a televisar estos eventos en español. Así que bueno, con un poco de suerte de todo esto terminan saliendo televisaciones por Dash 28 en español. Así que bueno, ojalá que pase.
Sí, que cuente con nosotros.
Yes, Mike, definitely count with us for those Spanish games. And just one more thing that we wanted to say is a big thank you for the chess clock. I think that we couldn't stand more UV games of 5 hours long anymore.
Oh yeah.
So
great.
Thank you very
Glad
much.
You guys like it.
Yeah,
I'm actually looking forward to when we start going back to in-person events and people have to play with it with masks on, because like, don't touch your opponent's models, don't touch their dice, don't like all of that, like don't touch anything that your opponent might touch. I fully expect to see some people where, you know, some games where like both players have their phones out and they're both playing on the Dash 28 clock in person because they only ever have to touch their own phones. They don't have to both touch the same chess clock.
Yeah.
So I think that might help with some of those in-person games, because I don't know how it is down there, but up here, like you have to wear a mask at all times if you're in a gaming store, and they can only have so many people in the store at one time, and they have the tables really spread out, and they have lots of rules of thumb, like don't touch any of your opponent's stuff, don't shake hands with your opponent before a game, like none of that stuff. So like I expect I'll see some people playing with it in person over the next few months as well.
Okay, yeah, that would be definitely interesting. So Mike, one last thing that we wanted to discuss about the site, and I think this is like actually really funny because we used to make jokes on this a lot, and this is on the tier D units, or the units rank as tier D. That we usually make jokes because you know, in the description says unplayable units. So and definitely we do jokes with, you know, Group Panthers or the Hydra or whatever, and we know that you don't write the articles, but we would really like to know your opinion on these guys. But because I rushed into the question, let me just have the guys first translate what I said. And do the actual question in Spanish. Exe, Tincho.
Sí,
sí, la pregunta era que hizo Piojo en inglés, es un poco preguntarle, obviamente chiste, ¿no? Nosotros en nuestros episodios siempre hablamos al respecto, y obviamente siempre en chiste, con los tier D. Piojo nombraba las panteras de Basilea, o bueno, también que están en Sylvan King, y los Militia Mob o Hydra, que Tier D son injugables, unplayable.
Según ellos son injugables.
Según ellos, claro. Y nosotros nos reímos porque, de hecho, yo no salgo de casa sin panteras cuando juego con Basilea.
Yo con humano pongo milicia.
Después ves.
Claro. Y Andy juega. O sea, yo creo que justamente nosotros tres ganamos torneos usando estas unidades.
Y esas unidades ganando torneos. O sea, en el último torneo que juegan acá en Argentina y que gané, creo que Sí, y te puedo asegurar que creo que una partida o dos las ganaron, no las ganaron, pero fueron MVP.
Clave. Claro.
Ujú.
Sí, la mismo Andy con la Hydra, me acuerdo que ganó el Panhispánico, si no me equivoco, y yo el Vanguard con Mirilla, entonces como que empezamos para la chacota.
Claro.
Correcto.
Yeah, Mike, we just added a few more things to the question because we usually make this joke. We have the experience that these units, particularly, usually end up being our MVP of several games, and actually in games that we like had the good luck of winning tournaments using these units. So that's why we joke so much about it. So what's your thoughts on these tidy units?
So clearly you guys have figured out our trick here is that we actually put really good units in D tier to fool our opponents into thinking we don't know what we're doing. And then we show up with armies full of them and just wreck everyone.
We were sure
They don't see it coming.
We were sure about it.
Sí, de hecho nosotros siempre decimos que cuando toca armar una lista miro que tiene Dash 28 en Tier D y con eso empiezo a armar la lista. Así que les adivinamos la intención.
Yeah, Tincho is saying that we knew the trick because a common suggestion that we give is when you're starting a list, look in the Dash 28 articles for units that are Tier D and put 2 or 3 of those first. And then you build the list.
That's your base.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Piojo, traducite lo que dijo Mike.
Dale.
Sí, que perdón, lo pasamos por alto.
Sí,
que lo pasamos por alto.
No, perfecto. Bueno, le dijimos la pregunta a Mike de las unidades Tier D y automáticamente nos dijo lo que nosotros decimos muchas veces en broma, pero ahora lo dijo él, que es que es un truco que hacen para engañar a la gente y que jueguen con otras cosas y después ellos llegan a los torneos y tienen un montón de unidades que son Tier D en sus propias listas. Y con eso, bueno, llegan muy buenos resultados.
Nos atrapamos.
Okay.
Así que bueno, nada, muy completa la cobertura de las Tier D.
Sí.
Si les parece, vamos a las últimas.
Sí, vamos a la otra, sí, lo liberamos también.
Sí, así lo liberamos.
La pregunta es, si quiere hacerla breve, la respuesta no hay problema, es que
sí.
¿Qué le pareció el cambio de meta entre lo que es mesa y el Universal Battle? Y si notó alguna diferencia en ese cambio de juego.
Perfecto. Okay, Mike, so last 2 questions. We know that we are running out of time. So again, thank you for being here at this time. And if you want to answer this one briefly, that's totally fine because we are already past time. But the question is, how did you find the difference between UV games versus real, actual board games with miniatures? If there has been any change in the meta, if you saw things that you didn't see before. Again, if you want to go long, that's totally fine for us. But if you want to be brief, that's good as well.
Sure. Let me think. So the meta in the region that I live in the Mid-Atlantic region, we tend to have a pretty well-balanced meta, but we do tend towards more elite armies, I think. Our two regions that were kind of closest to, well, I guess 3 regions that were kind of closest to. The Northeast also tends to have a fairly balanced, slightly skewed toward more elite lists meta, I would say. The Midwest, which is one of our other neighbors, is kind of famous for going with the trash army, right? Like the high drop, high unit strength, like how just all the bodies they can fit on the table, goblins, kingdoms of men kind of armies, or orcs, that kind of thing. And then the Southeast, which is our other neighbor down to the south, is kind of famous or infamous for having like a really shooting heavy meta.
Okay.
And so, like, compared to all those, like, I think we're more balanced and tend to have more of an elite style. So it's always fun to, play in your local tournaments, but then travel to other regions where, like, the meta is really different. and see how you do against like really good players who are used to playing a totally different style from how your local guys are. The UB meta, I think, it's definitely different from playing in person, just because of the one, like how easy it is to make units, right? Like you just copy and paste, and there you go.
Yeah.
You got seven hordes of goblin rabble, no problem. That would have taken you like 6 months to put together in Paint in real life.
Yes.
So I think we see armies in UB that like no one would ever actually put together in Paint. But I think it's cool that people get to experiment with those kind of lists in UB tournaments. I know that people used to do them for practice games, like kind of before the pandemic. Like people who played UB would get like 1 or 2 practice games in with a list idea to see if it's worth actually buying the models for. But now that there are so many, 60-person international UB tournaments like that, you can really test some of these kind of far out unconventional list ideas. And I think we've seen some really interesting stuff come out, like X's lists. I think were a great example. Like if you'd shown me, that kind of high drop Kingdoms of Men list, I'd be like, does this guy play historical games normally? Like has he played Kings of War before? Right. But like it worked really well, right? And so I just think it's cool. I think it's cool that it's such like a breeding ground for trying out all these kind of extreme lists. And I don't know how many of them we're going to see translate to in person. But I think it's definitely had an impact on the meta. Like I don't know that Kings of War has ever had like a global meta before, but I feel like we've had several 60+ person international tournaments now, and you can look at the top finishers there and say like, all right, this is what the international meta looks like. This is how Australian players tend to fare when they play folks from the UK or whatever, and those are matches that we never see. So I think it's cool. It's like I feel like it's been almost like an incubator. And I feel like the in-person games of Kings of War are going to be very different when we start playing in person again. When you have people that have been playing through the pandemic online, playing against people who like haven't played at all for a year, I think there's going to be a really weird like skill gap and meta gap between folks that have been playing consistently, really competitive games online versus folks that have just said, well, I'll wait till we can play in person again. So yeah, I have no idea what the tournament season is going to look like coming up this year because of that. But I think it's going to be, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see folks who played UB tournaments finishing higher than folks who didn't play much over the last year, at least for the first several months.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, let me get that. And that's a very good answer, by the way. Bueno, ahí nos contaba Mike de cómo lo ve a las diferencias de mesa versus V. Empezó contándonos un poquito de cómo son los metas locales en su región, que tienden a jugar más bien Elite, los hermanos del este que tienden a acribillarte a disparo, la gente del oeste que juega con más unit strength y un poco más de fuerza de unidad, de bulto, unas listas por ahí más parecidas a las de Exe. Y bueno, justamente hablando de esto. Sí.
Estuviste bien. Se la dejé pasar y me entregaste a mí.
Y bueno, justamente hablando de esto, de los distintos metas que se veían un poco entre regiones, que ellos tienen la suerte de ver allí, empezó a hablar Mike de cómo V genera listas definitivamente distintas. Esto que habíamos señalado nosotros en algún momento, de que querés tener 7 unidades de Rabel o de zombies, hace 2 clics y los tenés. Pero que también se empezó a formar una suerte de meta mundial y bueno, con todo el impacto que eso tiene, ¿no? O sea, no solamente poder probar una lista y una idea si vos tenés ganas, sino poder empezar a subirte a ver qué está rindiendo a nivel mundial, con todas las ventajas que eso trae. Y cerró, si no me equivoco, contándonos un poquito respecto de cómo se imaginan las diferencias cuando vuelvan los torneos físicos, la gente que por ahí no estuvo jugando y cómo se quedó atrás, sea en nivel de juego o sea en estilos de listas. Así que nada, súper sí, bueno,
que
interesante y emparejado.
Que acá tuvimos la suerte de poder jugar un torneo en febrero y que, o sea, había, así me acuerdo rápido, 3 listas de 10 que tenían 2 dragones.
Sí,
Cuando en V eso no existe.
totalmente. O listas sin chaff, que no lo veíamos
Sí,
nunca.
No.
Sí, definitivamente.
Ujú.
Bueno, pero equipo, creo que hasta ahí más que recontra completo.
Sí.
Y si les
Decía
parece,
que
vamos a...
le voy a mandar una foto de que yo tengo todos mis berserkers listos y pintados para ponerlos
Dale,
en-
ahí le digo eso, que también es un buen punto, me faltó traducir. Lo último que dijo Mike contándonos era que en otro momento, si él hubiera visto una lista como la de Exe, que es una lista que se acuerdan ahora, hubiese dicho, esta persona seguro está empezando a jugar Cow, así que nada, ahí estuvo gracioso el chiste respecto, y bueno, y ahí le cuento que esa lista existe.
Claro.
Okay, Mike, so the last thing about this is regarding the list from Exe, the ones with the Berserkers and Militia Mob. He wanted me to let you know that the list is actually built to play in the table. And he's going to send you a picture.
Unpainted.
Yes,
Claro.
antes que lo haya creado en V.
Claro,
Yes,
claro.
yes. The list is before UV.
Yes.
So, Mike, this is like the final question that we ask all guests, but I'm going to do it in the right order this time. So, guys.
Bien, le vamos a hacer la última pregunta que siempre se la hacemos a todos los invitados, y es ¿cuál es su sueño en King of War? Con la más amplia de los... La pregunta es amplia, se puede referir a su sueño propio o a qué espera de King of War. Así que adelante, estudios.
Okay, Mike. So the final question, and it's the question that we ask all our guests, is what's your dream with Go? And we know the question is like vague and very weird, so you can go nuts with this one. Whatever you want, something personal, something with the game, something with the site, whatever you want. It's your time.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess I kind of already said one, right? If there was a way for me to broadcast in-person tournament games, right, from any tournament anywhere in the U.S. or screw it, it's a dream anywhere in the world, right? If I could somehow magically have a camera hovering over any table at any tournament in the world, that would be pretty cool, right? We could broadcast all that stuff. That'd be awesome. Slightly more realistic dream.
Okay.
I would like to get to run the U.S. Masters one year, because it's a national tournament. So the way they decide who runs it is some regions decide to bid on whether or not they want to run it, and so basically you write up a document saying how you would run it, like where you would have it, like what venue you would have it in, how much it would cost, what the local attractions are around there. You basically like write up a sales pitch, and you send that to the Masters committee, and then they pick which one out of the bids they get, and then that's who gets to run the Masters that year. And we were kicking around the idea of us running it somewhere here in the Mid-Atlantic last year, but then of course it got postponed and thrown. Pandemic happened, so
Yeah.
that all went out the window. But I would love sometime in the next year or two to put together a good bid and get to run the U.S. Masters, because I feel like it's every region now that like wins the bid and gets to host it, they treat it like an opportunity to kind of to welcome like the entire national community to their region and to put on like a good show for them, right? To like show them what you guys do well. Just kind of show off your local culture a little bit, and just do a really good job on like a really big stage. And I think that would be. They also had another event called the Best of the Rest, which was at the same time in the same room, And that was just an open tournament that anybody who felt like coming to could come to. And they had another 60 people show up just for that. So there was like 120 people
Wow.
playing Kings of War at the U.S. Masters, right? So there's like two tournaments going on at the same time in one room, but they're both Kings of War tournaments. And yeah, like that's huge. And then once that happened, I was like, okay, so the bar's been raised. Now, whenever anyone wants to run the Masters, they have to run a side tournament for anybody who didn't qualify but wants to come just to play and hang out. And so we've been thinking about it. We're like, okay, if we were going to run the Masters, like, how would we raise the bar? Like, what would we add? Because I feel like this, like at this point, it's kind of like a poker betting thing. So like, I'll see your bet and I'll raise you, something else. So like when you put in your bid, you got to raise them something. And so I think it would be cool to get a chance to run like 120 person, Kings of War tournament with people from all over the country and show everybody a good time. Like I like running events, and that's kind of the big one. So that would be my short term. Sometime in the next 2 to 3 years, I would love to get to run that. And then like long term, like just figuring out how to have just let everybody in the world share what cool things they're doing with their models with everybody else somehow.
Okay. Well, that's very good, very interesting, and I hope very possible. the last one. So let me get that for the guys. Ahí le preguntamos por la pregunta de siempre de Un Sueño con Cow. Nos contestó muy muy completo. Voy a empezar por la última en este caso, que era referida a correr, a dirigir, a organizar el Masters, que esto es algo que básicamente se solicita al comité que uno quiere, que uno está interesado en correrlo y se solicita si lo puede hacer su región, y el que lo hace puede como mostrar un poco de su cultura y superar a lo que hicieron en el torneo anterior y bla bla bla, que está buenísimo, pero además le surgió una extra, que es que la última vez que lo hicieron no solamente organizaron el Masters, sino que organizaron el Best of the Rest, que vendría a ser algo así como el resto, o los mejores del resto.
El mejor del resto.
Exacto.
Sí.
Y eran otros 60 players jugando en paralelo con los 68 del Masters, así que ahí quedó la vara bien, pero bien alta.
En el mismo edificio, ¿no? O sea, en el mismo
Claro,
lugar.
al mismo
Estaban
tiempo,
jugando.
casi
Todo.
Casi 130 jugadores jugando al mismo tiempo.
Sí,
Correcto.
sí, una locura. Súper interesante. Y bueno, y ese sueño parece bastante alcanzable, por eso elegí empezar en la traducción por ese primero. La verdad que nosotros, siendo unos maestros del soborno y las elecciones dudosas, podríamos ayudarlo con eso. Bueno, y después, en primer lugar, uno que ya nos había adelantado, que era esta idea de televisar un partido en vivo o partidos en vivo, que al principio empezó con algo local, pero después se permitió volar un poco, porque eso es lo que te permite la pregunta. Dijo, bueno, en cualquier lugar del mundo. Así que nada, ¿quién te dice algún día se organiza un mundial de Cow físico y Mike lo televisa?
Sí.
Estaría bueno.
Pay-per-view.
Pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Así que bueno, equipo, creo que con eso hemos...
Perfecto.
Le robamos... aclaro esto, le dijimos a Mike que íbamos a hacer entre 30 y 60 minutos, vamos 2 horas. Así que
y nos creyó.
yo creo que ya le podemos agradecer, ¿no?
Sí. Big thanks for the time, Mike.
Oh, absolutely. No, this was great. This was great, guys. Thanks so much.
We
It's been
love
fun.
you, Mike.
Thanks. I love you guys too.
Bueno, Exe, hacete la despedida formal, que se lo paso y seguimos con el final.
Sí, bueno, nada, agradecerle a Mike. Para nosotros es un referente desde de alguna manera de nuestros inicios de Cow. Es un referente para nuestro programa de Cow. Así que fue un placer tenerlo acá con nosotros y tenerlo en un mano a mano, que era algo hace 2 años impensado, porque quizás el Cow no era tan global, y ahora como que esta pandemia es mala, de alguna manera nos unió como comunidad global, y bueno, y creo que él esté hoy acá hablando para 3 locos argentinos en la punta del mundo, es el mejor ejemplo de que lo que logramos como comunidad. Y que le agradecemos.
¿Tincho?
No, eso, comparto las palabras de Exe. La verdad que esto, impensado antes de pandemia, es una de las cosas que la pandemia nos dio como comunidad al juego, y es muy beneficioso. Y armamos este programa un poco con el norte de lo que ellos hacían. Así que nada, mil gracias por
La
por
turra
el
también
tiempo.
nos inspiró, ¿no?
También,
Sí.
de verdad.
Ok. Bueno, ahí le digo. Okay, Mike. So, the guys just said that they wanted to thank you for your time, for being here. When we started about a year ago, this was like totally impossible, a dream with Go for us. We started having you and Dash 28 as a reference, and something that we wanted to, in our own way, try to replicate, but for the Spanish community, because not everyone speaks in English. So we wanted to do something similar that what you were doing, helping beginners and discussing tactics and so on. And for us, it's like really a dream and something that we are very, very happy to do, to have you here. And that the fact that you are talking with 3 nuts crazy guys from the other end of the world, it's really an honor for us. And well, almost that. I think that's it. Thank you very, very much for being here with us.
Oh, sure. No, absolutely. Like this was a great time. I love chatting with you guys. It's been great getting to meet so many people from all over the world over the last year. Like if the pandemic had any upside, it was like, well, I can say that I have friends in Spain and Argentina and Australia that I didn't have before. So that's pretty cool. No, that's great. Like I'm when people tell you like, yeah, we saw something that you did and we decided we wanted to do it too, to put our own spin on it for our own communities, like that's the best. That is the best compliment, and I'm not kidding at all. That is the best compliment we could ever get for Dash 28, is that we inspired somebody else to do the same thing for a community that we have trouble reaching just because there's a language barrier. So that's awesome. I'm so glad that you guys are still doing this. Please keep it up. Please keep putting out episodes, because the more the merrier. Maybe we can figure out how to get you guys commentating on some live streams sometime or something like that. But no, this has been great. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike.
Mike, you can come to Argentina when you want. You got the full tour with asado, barquito, todo.
If I ever take a vacation anywhere in South America, I will let you guys know.
Right. Okay, that's very good to know. Okay, Mike. So with that, we let you off the hook. We again thank you very, very much, and we let you go back to your life, your family, and your things.
All right, great. Thanks so much, guys. All right, I'm going to drop off now. Thanks again. You guys have a good night.
Okay, you too.
Bye, Max. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bueno, y acá se acaba de ir Mike. Qué programón que les acabamos de dedicar, chicos, en 2 idiomas. Le tiré que venga al Full Tour Argentina con barquito. No sé si acaba de pasar desapercibido, pero tremendo. La producción está en llamas, ¿no? Nos estallan los servers, llamada internacional directamente. La factura de Telecom este mes va a ser tremenda. Dejamos todo nuestro presupuesto, pero esto no termina acá. O sea, ahora nos quedan unos minutitos más, pero para que vean el presupuesto, otro invitado especial desde Norteamérica que estaba esperando en línea, lo dejamos esperando en línea, va a decir unas breves palabras por este último programa. Adelante el Pato Donald, por favor. ¿Qué dice el Pato Donald? No se le entiende nada. Medio puesto. Una despedida de temporada, Pato Donald, lo único que te pedimos. Para eso nos cobraste. Estás re loco el Pato Donald. Bueno, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Así que bueno, esto ha sido más que un programón. No sé si hay tiempo para cerrar con un poquito de lo que pasó esta semana, que básicamente la rompimos con el Piojo. Si querés,
Sí.
Piojo, dale un toque vos y ya con esto nos despedimos con
Sí,
este
sí.
programón.
Yo creo,
Bien
Exe,
arriba,
que
internacionalmente.
Yo creo que, Exe, que esto fue a nivel producción. O sea, me preguntabas, o sea, podemos hacer un programa entero hablando de lo que fue la producción de este. Nada, tremendo. Pero nada, yo lo dejaría diciendo que sí, que nos despedimos con un podio, 2 de 3 del podio argentinos. O sea, a ese nivel, que para el caso, si hubiesen sido panhispánicos, me daba lo mismo. Pero bueno, en esta tuvimos la suerte de que sean argentinos, 2 de 3. Creo que podemos ampliar de esto en otro episodio, pero nada. Hablando un poco de comunidades a nivel mundial, creo que esto da una muy buena y muy interesante nota.
Sí, la verdad los felicito a ambos dos. Quedar segundo y tercero en un torneo de... ¿Cuántos fueron? ¿Cuánta
69.
gente? ¿69?
Sí,
69 había.
69 personas.
Que había player que nosotros conocemos de nombre y que son de los mejores jugadores de sus países. Había, o sea, estaban los mejores jugadores de España, los mejores jugadores de Estados Unidos. Creo que había australianos, si no me equivoco, también jugando.
Sí, bueno, el primero es australiano.
El primero y el cuarto.
Claro, bueno, el primero fue australiano.
Que
el
no
cuarto
jugaron
también.
contra nosotros, ¿no? Hay que decirlo.
Sí, se me escapó por un puntito. Si no lo agarraba en la final.
Así que me parece que nada, estamos como comunidad argentina bien rankeados. Recordemos, Exe ganó un torneo, Emi salió segundo, si no me equivoco.
Sí, en este mismo, el año pasado.
Bien.
Claro, y así.
Así que nada, me parece que hacemos buenos papeles cuando nos toca hacer torneos afuera por UB.
Déjame decir esto y Leopoldo de Córdoba, de la comunidad de Córdoba, quedó top 20 en 69. Me parece una performance resarpada. Así que, bueno, no termina solo el podio, sino que también se metió Leo ahí en el podio. Y felicitaciones para él.
Recontra.
Sí.
Recontra y recontra merecidas. La verdad que el laburo que viene haciendo Leo con Cow a todos los niveles.
Sí.
Mirá, yo creo que se ganó un programa, Leo. En cualquier momento lo sacamos.
Se viene.
A ese
bueno,
nivel.
podemos un poco la comunidad de Córdoba, que creo que con la pandemia repuntó y ganó un montón de adeptos. Y de hecho, ahora mandan fotos al WhatsApp de Cow de la comunidad argentina, que antes por ahí era como más esporádico o era como algo que pasaba una vez por mes o inclusive más largo en el tiempo, y ahora están jugando todos los fines de semana. Creo que los potenció el haber jugado en V como comunidad, y ahora lo replican en mesa.
Así que bueno, muy contentos por eso, por este resultado, por los resultados de nuestros compatriotas. Los de España también quedaron en el top 20, no sé si 1 o 2. Así que muy bien también. Paco es uno de los que me acuerdo que quedó ahí arriba.
Sí, Exe, perdón, te meto un comentario ahí que no lo puedo dejar de decir, casi me olvido. La de mensaje que me mandaron los chicos de España antes del último partido, tremendo. Y creo que fue antes de que juegue Charlie, que después, como iba con más puntos que yo, ganó su partido, yo ya no podía campeonar, pero una locura, me explotaba el teléfono con los pibes, estamos todos contigo, dale, no sé qué. Así que la verdad que la camaradería, un lujo.
A mí no me mandaron ninguno, pero igual sé que me quieren.
Eso es porque saliste.
Es que
eso
lo mío fue un milagro, o sea, lo mío fue realmente. Yo estaba, digo, estoy peleando por el cuarto o quinto. Si me va bien y
Sí.
me metí ahí en el podio.
Recordemos que, o digamos, Piojo ganó sus 5 partidos y quedó
Claro.
segundo. Y Exe ganaste 3 y perdiste. No, ganaste 4 y perdiste 1.
Sí, perdí uno solo. Y los que gané tenían buenos puntos. Era bastante difícil, igual que quedé tercero, pero bueno, me apecharon, amigos, y acá estamos. En el podio, abrazadito ahí con Piojo, dale.
Así que nada, yo creo que le vamos a tener que dedicar un poquito más en algún momento.
Sí.
Pero bueno, buena para mencionar. Ahí fresquita la salida del horno.
Así que
Sí.
creo que hasta ahí estamos. Y nada, me parece que
No,
dejamos
yo quiero
Sí.
mencionar que Exe, en su compulsividad, nos anotó en otro torneo.
Puta madre. Boludo,
No, boludo,
yo me acuerdo
la
cuando
bandera
terminé.
patria se tiene que defender.
Cuando terminé, mi primer mensaje fue: qué alegría, boludo, ya no tengo que jugar más.
Pará,
no sé
eso-
qué.
Yo me levanto el domingo. Un mensaje de Exe. Un mensaje tu lista, Tincho. Yo un domingo, tu lista, Tincho. Digo, ¿qué carajo le pasa? ¿Viste? No sé qué hablaba. Y empieza a mirar los mensajes de un torneo de pareja que pensé que no íbamos a jugar porque lo habíamos hablado, no sé, hace meses atrás. Sin
Yo no me olvidé.
quedarme corto. No, veo que no te olvidas.
Sí, qué lo parió.
Mandá la lista. Y te mandé la primera lista que tenía ahí. Pero bueno.
¡Viva la patria!
Un torneo cada 15 días por equipos.
Sí.
Así que sí, yo me levanté ese mismo domingo con un mensaje del ruso tramposo exigiéndome mi lista. Lo mandé bien a la mismísima mierda misma, como se merecía, a las 6 de la mañana.
Es verdad que el próximo invitado internacional, porque esto ya, o sea,
no,
esto va a
Tincho,
seguir
ni lo digas.
escalando.
Ni lo digas. Ni lo digas, te voy a subir el volumen de la música. Exe, mandalo a dormir el programa.
Bueno,
Acá nos
cerramos
despedimos.
acá. Creo que hemos dejado la vara bien alta este cierre de temporada. Estoy muy contento con el programa de hoy y con lo que logramos. No tengo ni idea cómo va a ser la temporada 4. Pero bueno, acá estamos.
Sí, sobre
la verdad que
la hacemos.
Sí, seguimos dejando la vara alta, es complicado superarla.
Sí, hasta el Maipo no paro. Así que, bueno, amigos, gracias. Y no, obviamente esto no sería posible sin oyentes, porque por alguna razón lo hacemos para ser escuchados. Y gracias por estar ahí del otro lado bancando y siempre tirando buena onda y mensajitos. Y sobre todo buena onda. Que viene bien en este momento, que es creo que un poco difícil para todos con esto de la pandemia. Y aguante el hobby y a darle para adelante. Abrazo grande y hasta la 4ª temporada, amigos. Chau, chau. Chau, Pato Donald.
Abrazo grande.
Chau, chau.